Yeah, you're good to go.
All right. Welcome. Quorum being present, I call this meeting of the Annapolis Historic Preservation Commission for the administrative meeting for the month of February 2021. The meeting shall come to order. The commission operates pursuant to the land use article of the annotated code of the state of Maryland. Local authority for the commission is derived from municipal code of the city of Annapolis, chapter 2156. The purpose of the HPC is to preserve sites, structures, and districts of historical, cultural, archaeological, and architectural significance. Requirements for serving on the commission are detailed in chapter 21, section 8.06. The HPC operates pursuant to the State of Maryland Open Meetings Act, and therefore no pending application shall be discussed between or amongst commissioners outside the public hearing to determine the disposition of the application. Next on the agenda is roll call. So if the HPC commissioners would go around the room. Bill Williams. Just here. Kim Finch.
Here.
Bobby Collins.
Here.
Will Scott.
Here.
I am Tim Leahy. I'm the chair. We have with us Roberta Laynor, who is Chief of Historic Preservation.
Here.
And John Tower may join us. Cheryl Wood is with us. She is our liaison with the Office of Law.
Here.
And our recorder is Tammy Hook. All right. With no further ado, I'd like this is a joint meeting with the Planning Commission, which is great. I almost wonder why we haven't done it sometimes in the past. But if the planning commissioners who are here would just introduce themselves, I would appreciate that.
Well, I shall start, and I shall say that yes, I would have looked forward to more kinds of joint ventures like this. My name is Robert Waldman. I'm the vice chair of the Planning Commission.
And I'm Diane Butler, and I like to say I'm the junior planning commissioner. I'm the newest, and I've been here 2 years. And thank you for the presentation in advance.
Alex Klein. This is my fourth year, maybe fourth year on the commission.
Great. I think that's it for right now. All right. So tonight we have a special presentation from the City Dock Action Committee. And so I'll just turn it over to Eileen, who I believe is the quarterback for this.
Well, the quarterback, I'm the water boy here, the water person. Thanks so much.
I'll mute myself now. Everyone else probably should too.
Mark, if you would put up the slides. Well, first of all, we are just delighted to be here this evening to share the progress of City Dock, but also to introduce all of you to the team, to the managers that you'll be working with over the next several years. From Annapolis Mobility and Resiliency Partnership. That's the last time you'll probably hear that name. It's AMRP. They are the designers and the builders for Hillman Garage and City Dock. Next slide, please. This evening we have with us, we're very pleased to have Robert Clark, who's president and CEO of Historic Annapolis. We have Alderwoman Tierney with us, City Manager David Gerald. And you'll be hearing from Ivan Dooland, who is the project manager, describe the scope and schedule, and Bryce Turner, who many of you have met with BCT Design Group, will be providing all of the latest images for you. The City Dock and Hillman Garage project is right at the very beginning. It's what we call the pre-development phase, which started last month in January. And this is the phase during the next year where the consultants, the architects, the engineers, the developers will be looking at the feasibility of the project, data gathering, and kind of making sure all of their assumptions as they go into actual development are correct. To ensure that the commission, Planning Commission, and the Historic Preservation Commission, to ensure that you get the full overview of the scope of this project, we would ask that you wait with your questions until after Bryce and Ivan have completed. We're looking forward to a robust discussion this evening with both our commission and our HPC. And Robert, do you have some comments?
I do. Thank you, Eileen.
Next slide for Robert.
Good evening, everyone. Historic Annapolis is so pleased to be here and grateful for all of our partners who helped us get here. It's been an exciting and eventful journey. 2.5 years ago, we started with a problem and now we have a solution. Eileen asked that I provide you a few words of background. As you likely know, the city was threatened with a proposal for a hotel at City Dock that gave the preservation community great pause. Would have necessitated an ordinance for vision that would alter the height and bulk restrictions that had defined the City Dock landscape for decades. In response to the idea, Historic Annapolis secured the funds to bring in an Urban Land Institute panel to introduce fresh ideas and creative thinking about the challenges we are facing, from parking to flooding. This panel then spearheaded a year-long planning effort that culminated in a final report by the City Dock Action Committee. Historic Annapolis is proud to have been a leading force behind this effort, and we're exceptionally proud that we connected with the ULI, ably led in this conversation by Brett Turner and coordinated with the panel 2 years ago. That intense 2-day experience was the driving force behind this entire effort. We're exceptionally proud that our colleagues at ULI consider our program a potential national model for how a nonprofit can partner with a municipality and work together. We're also proud about our growing partnerships on the federal level, most notably the National Park Service Chesapeake office and the United States Naval Academy. We're fully committed to working with city government and various commissions to continue to advance this effort. Our collective vision is a resilient City Dock, an economically viable City Dock, a reinvigorated City Dock that respects our historic context and historic sense of place. We feel strongly that the Planning Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission play a prominent role in creating this vision. Forward, we ask that you consider what we heard from the community, that there is a strong desire to maintain the characteristics that make Annapolis special, but also meet the needs of a community in terms of parking and increased green space. We're optimistic that by working together, we'll be more effective in advancing this vision. A final thank you to city leadership and to all of you who volunteer your time and expertise to keep Annapolis wonderful. Eileen?
Oh, Robert, thanks so much. Next slide. And Ellie, I wanted to see, did you want to make a couple comments now or at the end of the presentation?
Oh, I can do it now. I'll be very brief. Thank you, Eileen and everyone. I'm just going to gear my comments to the audience that I have. As Robert Clark said, I don't want to forget how we got here. It was a reaction to the threat of losing the scale and the massing of our historic seaport. And we established that priority, respecting the standards bequeathed to us by the National Park Service. And that's what guides this project. We are using our resources, that is Hillman Garage, to construct a long overdue infrastructure to protect us for decades. I think my only regret about this is that the project managers and construction keep getting younger and younger than me. But other than that, I really look forward to you meeting the team. And thank you again, Eileen, for putting this together.
Oh, Ellie, thanks so much. Yeah, it doesn't, I have to just say, it doesn't get better over the years. Everyone gets younger. So Robert really set the stage for us. When the City Dock Action Committee came together, which was less than 2 years ago, the first thing everyone did was we took a look at City Dock. And as you can see from this image, we said, this is our 100% corner. Look at it. It's a sea of asphalt. It's a parking lot. It's an unkept waterfront. And everyone was in agreement that we, Maryland's capital city, can certainly do better. Next slide, please. The other issue that faced all of us, and of course, right in the middle of the project, we had a tremendous storm surge. This image here is from the boat show in 2019, is the ongoing and increasing flood risk to downtown. You know, in I was going to say 1969, there were less than 4 flood days a year. By 2013, there were 38. In 2019, 52 flood days a year where downtown was impassable. And by 2065, we anticipate that it will be every day, 265 days a year. So this was a call to action for all of us because the situation is urgent. The city no longer can kick the can down the road. Next slide, please. It was interesting because in the past, you know, there have been a lot of groups that have done a lot of good work, but it has never gelled. And I think the combination of the challenges that the City Dock group was faced with, people embraced that and they said, you know, this is a challenge, but it's an opportunity. It's a real opportunity to reinvigorate our capital city and to create what would be a very proud space. So it was out of that energy, which really dates to a little bit less than 2 years ago, that the whole effort got underway. The next slide, please. I'm sure many of you have heard or been involved in, I know several of you have been involved in this effort. The purpose of the City Dock Action Committee was really very clear. Create a broad-based consensus throughout the city for the future of the City Dock and identify clear actions rather than a more conceptual plan, a clear path forward. 92 citizens, business people, financial experts, preservationists, resiliency experts, parking experts, maritime interests all came together and they spent a very intense 8 months. And during that 8 months, they not only met with their own working groups to come up, as you can see from this tiny little circles, come up with very specific recommendations, each working group, but there were 22 meetings in the community. So a lot of the community, particularly the business and residential community in our historic district, came along with them. Next slide, please. The whole effort was started with ULI saying, here are some general things, a general direction. When this group got together, the action committee, they identified guiding principles. And I'm just going to mention 2 of them here, number 1 and number 4. And that is to enliven the entire pedestrian experience by creating an inviting green space with access to the water. And very importantly, to preserve and enhance downtown Annapolis's maritime heritage, its authentic character and view sheds by honoring the existing building envelope in the maritime focus. Next slide, please. In addition to those 2 principles, the other 3 principles on that slide reflected a strategic approach, and that was to confront long-standing unresolved issues, resolve the threat from flooding. It's upon us. And identify options so customers as well as residents can find parking downtown. No net loss of parking was an agreement. And the third and perhaps most important of all of these principles and strategic approach is to secure the health of our residential community and the viability of our downtown businesses. Throughout the process, everyone on that group took the position they had to always bring both the residents and the businesses together. It was not a win unless there was agreement from both groups. Next, please. So with that direction, you had, and I won't go through all of them, but you had all of these groups with very specific recommendations. The residents had recommendations about the authenticity, the scale, the character of downtown, and wanting family access. Next, please. The maritime group wanted to see a promenade, which is part of all of the plans, that would start at the Naval Academy and go all the way around City Dock, so that more of our residents and our visitors could actually have access to the water. Next, please. We also heard very importantly from the resiliency experts. Their effort was to make very clear, specific recommendations of how to protect downtown from Gate Zero all the way around the City Dock, with both raised elevations and flood devices, which you'll hear more from Ivan this evening. Next, please. The other group, which did a tremendous amount of work, which is, I think they're just now releasing a report, the Burtis House Work Group, or preservationists, and they made a commitment to restoring, protecting, repurposing Burtis House. The city has, as you all know, is being transferred the Burtis House from the state, and Historic Annapolis, with funding from the National Park Service, has just released a report on the restoration of Burtis House. Next, please. We also, and very, very strong voices, the residents, the business community, and the parking group were very clear. No net loss of parking, but let's try and be more strategic. Let's use messaging. Let's use real-time apps so that people can park in the right place, as well as let's bring in the bike and pedestrian connections rather than as an afterthought, as part of this entire vision. Next, please. When we look at all of this, the question everyone asks is, why success now? I mean, there have been terrific plans in the past over the years. 4 things. First, the urgency. We as a city have to act. This is our downtown. It is being inundated. The momentum that came not only from all of these people on the City Dock, but from the outreach, the 22 meetings in the community engagement, the partnerships. Historic Annapolis, the Park Service has been terrific through this process. The Naval Academy, Anne Arundel County, and having financial experts on this group to help set a direction, and also identify a resiliency financing authority for the future. So with that, I want to turn it over to Bryce. Next slide.
Eileen, thank you very much. It's very nice to be here with all of you tonight. This is very exciting. We're getting very close. We're in the early days of a very long process, but we've made incredible progress already, as Eileen outlined. This diagram that you see on the screen right now was kind of our consensus plan, we like to call it. It's not really meant to be a site plan, but it does represent a lot of thinking from a lot of different people. And while I had the honor of being on this ULI panel, the technical advisory panel, I also got a chance to work with the action committee, and I co-chaired the design committee along with Leo Wilson. And fortunately, we had a lot of great folks on that call, on that committee: Michael Dowling, Chris Shine, landscape architect Jay Graham, Michael Beatty, developer lives in Annapolis. And some really great thought came out of that, and a tremendous amount of time was put into developing this plan. Next slide, please. But before we talk more about City Dock, you know, this Hillman Garage is what's going to all make it all happen. This is really the trigger for making City Dock happen, by getting a more efficient Hillman Garage, and one that can house more cars. This existing garage, I think we would all admit, is near its useful life. It's an eyesore. It's probably becoming somewhat dangerous. It is about 3.5 levels. I think it's 425 cars currently. And we need to get that up to about 575 cars approximately. Next slide, please. One of the things that we noticed very early on was along Gorman Street here, which is the side closest to Main Street, is that we have the opportunity maybe to activate this facade in some way. And this was at the challenge of the city. We were trying to think of ways to adaptively reuse this building. And whether it's 5-10 years from now where these could become storefronts, or whether it's on weekends or times when the legislature is not in session, we could create flea market space, we could create a food market space. There's an opportunity to do more there and be a little bit of, it could be an art festival, art in the alley, if you will. So we're looking at some ways to activate the street. This was a very early design that was part of the proposal. We are currently working on designs for this building from all angles. We've had a chance to really get a CAD files shot with drones in order to get the exact size of the existing building and the exact envelope that's available to us to work in. We're looking at the historic guidelines as a way of thinking about how this building can blend in as much as possible with, say, Main Street, and yet be also kind of open and screen-like. So we're studying that now, and we look forward to coming back to you when we have something a little more concrete to show. Next slide, please. But at City Dock, we did a tremendous number of studies, analysis, looking at circulation paths, and this plan diagram really shows our area of scope of work, if you will. Starting at the Naval Academy at the top, as Eileen mentioned, we go all the way around the promenade there in the blue dotted line to Newman Street. And we really tried to focus on city-owned properties because for the time being, that's all that we can really impact. We have to reach out to our neighbors, of course, to make this a successful resiliency plan. But this is the area that we were working with. So that promenade we felt was very important to be extended the entire length of the harbor, every bit of waterfront possible, and even hopefully being opened up at the Fleet Reserve at some point. And then we also thought about the pedestrian circulation from the Market House along Dock Street, along storefronts, and how those could be improved and how that circulation path can be improved, but also thinking about how a green park that is elevated to provide the major flood barrier could also be an economic development tool for this community and really start to leverage investment in some of the adjacent storefronts that really need it, quite frankly. Next slide, please. So in this study and analysis, we thought a lot about the visibility of City Dock, the importance of City Dock and the lifeblood of Annapolis, the views from the top of Main Street, as you see here at the top of the page, where you really do see water from the top of Main Street. Probably one of the few places in America that you can get that rich of a town fabric with the Chesapeake Bay beyond. And in the lower photograph, you see as it opens up when you get closer to the bottom of Main Street and closer to Market House, as that entire space opens up into kind of a world-class space that is enjoyed by many, and we think can actually do even better by fighting climate change and some of the heat island effect that we're getting at City Dock. So next slide. And of course, City Dock has always been a working harbor throughout all these years, until modern times anyway. Very few vestiges of that harbor today. The Burtis House, of course, would be a nice reminder of the past there. But of course, we've learned, as in the next slide as well, the Sanborn maps tell us about some of the structures that were at City Dock. And so this view corridor that extends through City Dock, we've really thought about a lot. And while we have a tremendous need for shading at City Dock, we know that we may need some shading devices that are man-made, but we may also need some trees in here. We're thinking about ways that the existing harbor master building can be cut back in size, and how next to the Burtis House, we may be able to relocate some of the harbor master function in order to have a more properly scaled environment in City Dock Park. Next slide. And this is the Sanborn map, 1897. where you start to see some of the structures that were there previously. We think there may be an opportunity. One of the things that we kicked around in the design committee was whether or not a skeletal remnant of some of these older buildings could provide a frame structure for shading. So those are some of the things that we're studying. Next slide. So this was the plan that AMRP developed as part of the proposal process. And of course, this is done somewhat in a vacuum, but we had the tremendous opportunity of building upon the action committee's work. So obviously it's not very different at all from what the action committee had developed in the consensus plan. The major components of this, of course, at the very top right, you see the Burtis House labeled B. Just below that, label L, would be the adjacent building that would tie into the Burtis House in some fashion, as has been recommended by the recent report that's come out, and could have some harbor master functions in it. And it mostly is for viewing, of course, the harbor. We think this vantage point is a good one. Moving on down the plan at label H, the Susan Campbell Park becomes modified in some ways and renewed. The elevation is brought up a little bit, maybe an opportunity, a better opportunity for some shading there, and games and programming, and the ability for people to walk to City Dock and dip their toe in the water, if you will, which is something we heard throughout the entire process. The major function at the park, however, will be just that, an open park shown here as F, which will allow the boat show to continue its operation throughout Susan Campbell Park and the Green Park. We have the opportunity for some bus drop-offs for the boat tour functions that are happening there. Label D is the existing harbor master building that's been reduced in its footprint. And the reason was that it was felt that that building could be reimagined as a slightly smaller building, and that we need a location for pumps that will pump the water. That is a good part of the nuisance flooding that we have actually comes up out of the drains from below. It's not actually coming over the bulkhead, but in some cases under the bulkhead and up through the drains. And this will be a place where we can locate those pumps. Next slide, please. And so when you really view this in 3 dimensions, and especially from this vantage point from over the water, you really see obviously that sea of asphalt. And so it's going to be a really no-brainer, we think, to make the kind of improvement that you get when you look at this next aerial on the next slide. And this starts to give us the opportunity to keep the existing slips that we have there, but to get an incredible green space that will be elevated approximately 5 to 6 feet above where the existing surface parking lot is, especially closest to the water, which will give you an even better view out over the water. We think it's going to be very exciting. Again, I think some shading is going to be needed here. The promenade will be enhanced along its full length. And in this image, you can see the Burtis House on the right near the Naval Academy, and some type of structure that we would build for the harbor master adjacent to that. Next slide, please. So we think that, you know, this incredible view that people are going to still have when they arrive from Main Street will really be enhanced by the green surfaces that they see, the additional brick that we would be including. This particular slide shows some memorial circle and some potential changes there, although that's currently not in our scope of work, I want to point out. But we're looking at how we can get our flood barrier all the way around the harbor through the use of the existing 2016 bulkhead, some additional elevated walkways, a series of low walls, and some flip barriers to get a comprehensive system throughout, including 110 compromise here shown in the image. Next slide. So as we drill in a little bit closer, you start to see a fountain, potential splash park that a lot of people felt strongly about on the action committee. You start to see some of the steps that raise up to that green elevated park. And there, although you can't really see in this image, but some enhancements to the bulkhead that is on the lower left side of the image. Next slide, please. So the pump house and the restrooms will be a small portion of the existing Harbor Master building. The thought was, because of the incredible amount of utilities that come into that building that largely help the boat show, we would keep one portion of that building and repurpose it for the pump house and for toilets, and then possibly have an upper level viewing deck on top that could be used for some small functions. Next slide. So these are some images that we developed during the proposal process. And, you know, they're obviously incorporating brick and some metal and materials I'm sure we'll want to use. They are not meant to be by any means a final design. And we're just beginning to look at these again and looking for input from this group, but especially following very closely the guidelines that have been published. The splash park, as you see it on the right, the green park, just beyond that. And then you may even get a sense of that elevated view looking over the waterfront. Next slide. And just looking back at the other direction, we want to keep this building very light and airy as much as possible with some proportional scaled openings. Again, next slide. And one final view of that, looking back towards Market House. And again, you see the opportunity for some type of second level observation deck there that I think could be very interesting, as well as the entrance to some public toilets, which I think are very important at City Dock, and any successful urban space really needs those public facilities. Next slide. And then this is an image that we created for the Harbor Master building, which would sit adjacent to the Burtis House. My guess is the design of this is going to change considerably probably, but again, brick and steel and being as friendly as we can to the Burtis House, but making sure that no one mistakes this for a historic Annapolis building. So those are some of the studies that we've done. This will be the work that we have in front of us, is to develop these designs, to work with HPC and the city throughout this process. Again, we're very excited to be doing so. And I believe that's my last slide, Eileen. What's next?
Yes, thanks, Bryce. That was terrific. Next slide, please. Before you all get to meet Ivan Dooland, who you will enjoy working with as much as you have enjoyed working with Bryce Turner, I wanted to just give the commissions some background on how we hired AMRP. Starting in the summer of 2019, there was a very rigorous process put in place, a competitive process for RFQs, RFPs for Hillman and City Dock. And nationally, 5 nationally recognized firms competed in that process. Out of that, last summer, 2020, AMRP was selected. As soon as they were selected, the city brought on a group called CBRE. It's a highly regarded contract management, contract negotiators, and they worked with the city and AMRP to bring forward the pre-development agreement that is in place now. AMRP came on board late December. We're in what we call the pre-development phase, sort of that orange phase on your screen, from January until next December. And that's the phase where the feasibility takes place, the design and financing for Hillman, and some of the early design for City Dock. Construction will begin in January, a year from now. We're actually 11 months from now. And at the same time, the construction for Hillman is underway. The design for all of the resiliency and the city dock will take place. That construction for city dock will start after Hillman is up. And that will basically be from January 2023 to June 2024, when we anticipate completion. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to Ivan Doolin.
Thank you, Eileen. Hi, everybody. My name is Ivan Doolin. I'm a senior vice president with Hunt Companies, and I am leading AMRP's the AMRP team's development of these exciting projects. First of all, I just have to say that we are very excited about the project. We're incredibly grateful for the trust that the city has shown in selecting us, and we are must commend the city on the approach, the development approach and procurement approach that they've taken for the projects. We believe that this will be these projects will be looked at as a Pathfinder project, not only for the city and the state, but also nationally. As I'm sure you're all aware, resiliency and concerns around how to meet future climate challenges continues to be an increasing focus, and how to go about developing and delivering and also funding those projects are very high up on the agenda, and this will be one of the first real big projects out the gate. So we are very happy to be partnered with the city here. If we can actually skip 2 slides forward. Perfect, thank you. So just a little bit about the AMRP team. We're a consortium of different companies that have come together to deliver these projects. We are very excited about the quality of companies and experience that we've been able to pull together. A combination of local entities as well as companies with large international experience on resiliency and parking, and are very excited to be able to work with the city to deliver this. From Hunt and Amber side, we're actually in the process of delivering a somewhat a similar project in Biddeford, Maine, with combining parking as well as development of a downtown area. So this is right in our wheelhouse, so to say. If we can skip to the next slide. Thank you. I won't, Bryce has provided a very good overview of what were some of the things that went into the development of the kind of the design and the plan for the city docks. I won't repeat that. What I will do is hit on a couple of points when it comes to what resiliency is and how we're looking at this from our side. So we see resiliency as something that's more than just sea level rise and protecting against flooding. It is how do you make a city and a community better able to absorb impacts and challenges as they arise. For example, one thing that we've all experienced now over the last year is the importance of public spaces and outdoor space and public parks, and having flex spaces for outdoor dining and things of that nature is very important to the vibrancy of a city and of a community. And that's what's been driving a lot of our thinking around how we can develop a design that protects against sea level rise while activating city dock, and how can we provide the protection while also maintaining access to the water, as was referenced earlier. And we are in the process of further detailing and developing our plans right now. But what we are looking to do is trying to address the water level, not in one massive wall, but a tiered approach where there is a first line of defense, if you will, for the smaller flooding events, often referred to as nuisance flooding. But anybody who has been experienced flooding knows that there's no such thing as nuisance flooding. It's always bad. But have that first line of defense for the smaller floods, and then a secondary layer with either flip up barriers or movable barriers that can then withstand and protect against the large hurricane-like events. So we hope through a combination of these things that we'll be able to maintain access to the water, activate the space while also providing, as Bryce mentioned, some tree canopy or shading. City Dock is a fantastic area, but on a 100-degree day with a little bit of humidity, a little bit of shade does not go amiss. The other thing, and we can skip to the next slide. The other thing that we want to do is the parking spaces that are lost at City Dock are then picked up at the new Hillman Garage. And just as we're developing the designs for City Dock, we're further developing the designs now for Hillman Garage. What we will be doing here is developing a design that kind of fits within the existing footprint of the current garage. As I mentioned, we'll pick up the parking spots lost. We want to keep the vehicular entry and exits as exists today, so both on Gorman and Duke of Gloucester Street. We're excited about how the ground floor and other parts of the facility can be used for other purposes for the garage when during certain periods. So pop-up vendor and artist space, as Bryce mentioned, is something that we definitely can see can help reactivate Gorman Street in particular. And then also want to mention that we're undertaking currently a parking study to outline kind of the demand and need to kind of right size the garage facility to understand the parking dynamics of in and around Hillman and the City Dock area as a whole. So if we can jump to the next slide. And also wanted to mention mobility while talking about parking, because they very much go together. And we're looking to and very excited about having a mobility partner along with us on the AMRP team, not only to alleviate some of the concern and impact of what happens to all the cars when Hillman is undergoing or being reconstructed, and having a solution that helps move people around City Dock and alleviate the pressure on the City Dock, existing City Dock parking when Hillman goes offline. And then, so that is one aspect. The other is how mobility and other mobility solutions can be utilized to address some of the traffic issues and constraints that can happen, particularly in peak season. So with that, if we can jump to the next. Eileen mentioned, gave an outline of the schedule. I just wanted to touch on a little bit of how we're seeing the sequencing and how we're trying to minimize the disruption during construction. construction always has some impacts that come along with it, and we're very focused on trying to minimize those as much as possible. One of the things that we are wanting to do is sequence the work at Hillman Garage and City Dock such that it allows as much breathing room as we can through this period, and just be as good a good neighbor as we go through this, and help alleviate the pressure that a lot of construction activities can bring. One of the things that we'll be doing is starting construction after the holiday season this year, so we avoid that impact for local businesses. We are then going to be looking to complete the garage structure itself before the thrust of the following holiday season in 2002. And then only when kind of the major construction work or the structural work is done on Hillman Garage will we then look to start construction on the City Dock, and doing so in a way that avoids taking spaces from City Dock until the new Hillman Garage is up and running. So these items, together with the mobility solution with our partner from VIA, we hope will alleviate as much of the pressure and disruption that is caused by construction activities. So we can jump to the next one, and just wanted to give a brief overview of the process that we're going through in the PDA process now. So we're in the what's deemed feasibility review, which is further developing the designs and solutions that we did as part of our initial proposal. Studying the parking demand, some initial review of further development of the financing plan before we'll then kind of define the program and start the more kind of traditional project development of kind of narrowing down of the design solutions and estimation of Hillman Garage and City Dock. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is while they are two different projects, and Hillman will be running a little bit ahead of City Dock, as you just saw from the schedule, they are very much interlinked when it comes to the revenues from Hillman Garage are what will be used to develop and construct City Dock. So there is they're very closely linked in a symbiotic relationship. So we're completely dependent on putting some parameters around Hillman so that we know what we can do at City Dock and the both from a scheduling standpoint, but also cost standpoint. So that's why we're very glad to be here describing kind of our approach and process it, just recognizing that it is early days. And when we're talking about one, we're also always thinking about the other because they are, as I mentioned, very, very closely linked. So with that, Eileen, I'll hand it back to you.
Next slide, please. Ivan, thanks so much. With all of this taking place, the city is going to continue its multifaceted outreach and community engagement efforts. There will be ongoing work sessions with obviously the Planning Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission, but also the City Dock Action Committee will stay in place. We will be meeting with them as well as the residential and business communities. There are focus groups that will be providing input from the residents, from the businesses, as well as City Dock on a variety of issues. Initially, certainly the parking. And in terms, so that's the input, but how do people know what is going on? The city will have a very aggressive communication program, an interactive website where people will be able to put questions in social media, a newsletter. During the time that the garage is down, there'll be an app for parking to direct people to the right places to park. And throughout the process, there'll be public awareness with events at various milestones, certainly signage and branding at City Dock and Hillman, and particularly during construction, ongoing messaging. Next slide. So with that, I would like to ask thank all of you for your time and ask our city manager, David, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, well, thank you. And hi, everybody again. Obviously, you know, as an old public works guy, this is a very exciting project for me. So we can't wait to get started. Thank you for inviting us to the meeting tonight and for having the joint meeting. I think this is a great format. What a great team we have. I mean, thanks, Eileen and Ivan and Bryce. Your presentation was superb and we appreciate that. We think we have the right team. We think this is the right project. Now we just need the public to give us the input that we need for the design of the project. But we're really excited to get moving. As Eileen mentioned, this is the very beginning of it. We thought it was important to come to you all to get you up to speed on what's happening, because you're going to see much more of this project in the future. But we're just really excited, and hopefully we'll have a chance to answer some questions if you have any, but that Eileen will turn that over to you, I'm sure, in time. So thank you.
Okay, Eileen, are we ready for some discussion, some conversation?
We are ready.
All right, great. Who wants to start? I could make maybe a suggestion. Our guests from the Planning Commission may have questions, and excuse me if I'm misrepresenting, but you're kind of a higher level of planning than we are at the HPC. We tend to be very single site oriented. So this is a big project for us, master planning. But so I'll turn it over to anyone from the Planning Commission who'd like to ask any questions.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes, of course. Well, you've been there, so you tell us.
Well, no, I'm not going to do that, but they've already had a shot. Just saying.
Okay, well,
warning you about certain members of the Planning Commission, really.
Well, I'd still like to extend the courtesy as our guests.
I'm just kidding.
Okay, good enough. Questions from anybody on the Planning Commission?
I mean, I'll jump in first, if no one minds that. One of the things we talked about at our last meeting, when we were briefed on March 5th, we did that in person, if you'll recall. It may have been one of our last meetings in person. You know, one of the things I know I mentioned was enhanced facilities for boaters. So I do a lot of sailboat cruising. And one of the things that's really important to me when I get to a new city, especially with a nice seaport, whether it's Mystic or you're in Maine, you really like to get off the boat and take a shower. And I couldn't help but notice that there's one shower stall for men and one for women. So that, I mean, is that just the initial idea? You will be enhancing this, correct?
Yeah, this is Bryce. I definitely think we need to enhance that. We've gotten some feedback, and I remember your comment previously. And so it's really a matter of getting that programming right now, and and right-sizing these buildings and figuring out how to spread it out along City Dock. So yeah, absolutely.
Great, that's good to hear. I do think it adds to the economic viability of Annapolis as a cruising town. Part of the group I'm associated with is the Corinthians, and when we plan our annual cruises, we actually look for what kind of accommodations cities have for us. So thank you, I really appreciate that.
My wife
I have other things. Yeah, I'll let Alex and Bob jump in first, then I have some follow-ups.
Well, Thank you. I'm incredibly impressed by the speed with which this is happening. And I'm incredibly hopeful that there'll be many opportunities to provide feedback. And I'm very grateful for this first opportunity to really talk to the team and to the HPC, because I think we'll be working together on many aspects of this. Where I served on the first city doc, whatever it was called, study committee, seemed like many years ago, in which many of the same goals and aspirations and solutions were raised, discussed, and put down on paper. And Eileen is right. It took just some time, and it took the partnership with the Park Service and Historic Annapolis to bring this to consensus. Although there will be, as I'm about to say, many decisions before us to put these values into physical space. My focus on this is on the public spaces and making the public spaces, the pedestrian environment, to be the absolute best that it can be. And I return to that essential realization that everybody who's ever studied this has had, which is that there's just too many cars in a place which should be for real public enjoyment and use. And the city will find many uses. The more public space there is, safe pedestrian space, the more uses that will come up. So I look at the pedestrian side of it, and I have just a couple of comments. I'll leave a number of subjects to the HPC, but starting down at the end, what began this whole process was this hotel, which was proposed, which would have required legislative changes. And what I see down there is next to a public park down there is a broad expanse of, I assume, brickwork. But, and I can't tell from the pictures if you're envisioning that vehicles will also be there. And if that's the case, I strongly advise against that. I would suggest that all of that esplanade in front of what might be a hotel should be relegated to pedestrian uses, and that what might be a hotel, you have its vehicular access off of Prince George Street. Now, there are several advantages to that. Not only does it secure the park side of the building for public benefit, but also it could help to enliven Prince George Street, which, similar to Gorman Street, is kind of a neglected alley. It will become, in some ways, the access route to the Burtis House and the activities that go on there and at the envisioned Harbor Master building. But much of Prince George's Street up to, what is the street that goes across? Dock Street, Randall Street? I can never get it straight. There are two blocks, and both of those blocks could really use enlivening. They could become, if you get rid of parking on one side and you make it diagonal parking on the other, you could enlarge the sidewalk and create more public space for public use. I thoroughly applaud your envisioning that Gorman Street also needs to be enlivened. And once again, if you get rid of, if you widen the sidewalks there, you could end up with a fairly active place. It occurs to me that people who are exiting the garage will walk down whatever that little street is that's the entrance, that Main Street entrance to the garage, will then emerge onto Main Street and onto, by gosh, a narrow sidewalk on that side. So I think that some thought might go into that, what goes on lower Main Street, and making that, once again, a much broader esplanade. So we're not tripping over restaurant tables and winding our way around trees, but in using using that space for a much more pleasurable and safe experience. As you can tell, my focus at this point is not so much on the end, on Susan Campbell Park end of things, but on the lower Main Street, Market Plaza, Market Square end of things, Hopkins Plaza. I'm not going to refight the traffic circle. It's not in your scope. I'll retire from that field of battle, other than to say that the more public plaza esplanade that you have, the better this thing is going to be. But I'm not going to, let's not revisit that. I'd like to turn my attention to Hopkins Plaza. I'd like everybody to consider removing all of the parking spaces that front the Market House and the Hopkins Plaza, and thereby enlarging that plaza so that it actually becomes a useful place, a place for shade, and a place for public meeting and so forth. Those are my thoughts at this point. I realize Eileen is always saying I'm too far, too fast, too soon, but it's now that the ideas get out there, and I think that the thinking at this point should also look at that whole end of things, the Market House end of things, the Lower Main Street end of things, the intersection with Compromise Street. And finally, just as a kind of a maybe irrelevant, but a footnote, is when we were talking about mobility and as we've looked at parking over the years, over and over and over again, it is all, the solution that has come up always seems to be similar. Well, the solutions seem to be similar, and that is an integrated system of knowing how many spaces are in various garages, communicating that to the traveling public, and using the stadium as the intercept for darn near everything. I remember John Hammond speaking to the City Dock Action Committee, and that's something that he really stressed in his forceful manner. And that it's to be considered by your traffic managers as this thing moves along, is that the stadium is a huge space that's easily identified and easily accessed by small vehicles. But in final comment, the more public pedestrian space that we have, the better this is going to work for everybody. That's all I can, ask you to do at this point, and offer, as we go along, offer my intrusive comments as we proceed. Thanks, Tim.
Well, I'll just have to jump in and say, I think we are very much of a like mind. I appreciate that very much. I agree that making fantastic pedestrian spaces here is really what's going to be needed to make a huge difference. We do and have received some feedback, of course, about servicing and buses. And, we're getting some of that competing rhetoric that we have to deal with. But so I'll just leave it at that we would love to be able to continue to push it towards the pedestrian realm in a much greater way, and also incorporate Hopkins Plaza into the mix, into the scope of work.
Well,
Thank
so
you.
the nice thing about going last is there's not much else to say. So I agree with both what Diane said, being a cruising sailor myself, and very much with what Bob said about the pedestrian realm. And I'll just leave you with the little adage that the indicator species of his success is people and not cars. So we'll just reinforce all of his thoughts on the pedestrian realm with that little ditty. Thanks.
And if I could just reiterate something that Bob Waldman brought up at our meeting in March, we were talking about the bus drop-off and the idea of using the Naval Academy Stadium to support a shuttle service so that we wouldn't ever have those big buses parked downtown again. I think that's a really good suggestion. I don't know if it was ever really considered, but someone mentioned, I think it may have been well, I'm not sure, maybe it was Mr. Turner, that there would be still a place for buses to turn around on the in the area downtown where we thought there wouldn't be. Is that still being pursued or not being pursued?
Diane, that is one of the, what Bob brought up, and Alex and you are some of the remaining hotly contested issues, in that there are certainly those who want to see bus drop-offs. There are many who do not. There are certainly those who do not want to see more space given over to either buses or cars, but there are a variety of access issues. So those are going to be the issues, some of the many issues that are going to be debated at this stage. Now is the right time to start to get into them.
And then the issue we also brought up in March, I don't know if it's been addressed, but we spent some time on it. The promenade and seawall ends over at Newman Street, and we were saying that that's really not effective as a barrier to flooding if it ends at Newman Street. And I know it was discussed at the very beginning that you're really focusing on city-owned property. And when we met in March, we said, will you at least try to negotiate with any of the private property owners? Has that happened, or was that just off the table from the start and you were too polite to say it?
No, that hasn't. Let me turn this over to David.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's more of a city issue, so I'll discuss that. So the Fleet Reserve is very interested in this. So we're going to set up a meeting and have the discussion with them. They would have to pay for it, but you know, there's a lot of economy of scale if they hire our contractor to do that. We still have to do that with the Annapolis Hotel, but you're exactly right. If we leave those pieces out, then we're not going, unless we leave them inside the bathtub, right? That's their option, is they're inside the bathtub. So they can either be inside or outside the bathtub. Hopefully they'll make the right choice.
I like that analogy. I hope you use it with them.
I think we have to say that we all witnessed Bob Waldman, after 7 years, surrendering on the circle versus the square argument. Okay, there was a white flag that I saw.
Don't rub salt in the wound, Ellie.
Well, it's just too bad, because there's a tremendous amount of wasted space in the circle, and while it looks nice, on these renderings, because it's green, that's about like the grass you'd see, between the Walmart and the Target parking lot as the drainage ditch. It's just about as functional. Yeah. I mean, it might look nice, but nobody's going to go hang out in that little triangle. You put a bench there and people are going to sit there and watch the cars go by.
Okay.
So it's, but anyway, we need not to relitigate this.
If I could just, Tim, add a little bit, perhaps we could replace that circle with a circle elsewhere where people can gather, end their parades, and perhaps there's, that would function better and satisfy people as a acceptable compromise. So that's why I'm saying there's a lot of study that should go on that end of the dot. Thank you. And
Tim, so because this is the topic of the moment, I don't want Bob Waldman or Eileen Fogarty to fall off their chairs, but I don't want to give up on that either. I agree with what Alex just said about the so-called usefulness of that green space. And I go back to the traffic studies that said that a T intersection would be more effective for traffic control. I'm not giving up, Bob.
A comrade in arms.
There you go. Oh, well, I'm feeling we'll continue to talk about it. Well, thank you, folks.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to digging into the details of the Hillman site plan when we get there.
I think that's exactly where I'd like to. What I meant by the high picture, you were looking at, the Planning Commission looks at broader planning issues, and we now are more tactical, I guess. So I'm curious. If at least I usually like to organize the discussion a little bit, because there are many moving parts to this plan. And I think, and again, I want to thank you all for your presentation. It's very good, very thorough, and you're moving ahead. The sequence is important, and the Hillman Garage design I'd like to get some more information on it. We can ask some questions about it because it's coming first and it's coming quickly. So if we could maybe ask some questions, commissioners, about the garage, and then I think we want to move on maybe to what we've seen about the city dock plan, or the dock area itself.
I've got a
Well,
question.
I know Mr. Turner mentioned that it would be important to blend the garage architecture with Main Street. And I love that concept. But what was depicted was anything but that. So I'm assuming that's just a placeholder.
Yeah, how far, Bryce, how far along are you with the design of the garage?
We have actually just in the last few weeks begun a very different direction. I think we're going to be much more pleased with. And it was a bit of a placeholder that was in the proposal, and I think it was unfortunate in some ways. So, but yeah, we're looking at something that's brick and has proportional openings where we use brick that will relate better to Main Street, and also trying not to keep it looking too much of a big commercial building because it is a big building. But yeah, so I think we'll have something, in 30 days that we'll really be able to get our teeth into for you to get your teeth into. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions from other commissioners? Bobby,
Yeah.
Will, go ahead. Will's got
No, let Bobby.
Go ahead, Bobby.
At the beginning of the presentation, they talked about the fact that it's 3.5 levels now with a parking capacity of 425, and they need you to go to 575. But then there was talk of a right size study. I mean, to me, as someone that uses the parking garage almost every week at least, we would want to put as many spots in there as we can fit, I would assume. And the challenge would be fitting as many places as you can in given the footprint that you have both horizontally and vertically. What information can the study give us? I'm not quite sure I understand it.
Yeah, so what we're doing right now is studying kind of parking demand. Where are people going to and from? How long are they staying in the different garages, and as well as street parking, to understand the dynamics. So there is definitely a benefit of moving cars from City Dock to a new Hillman Garage, but we are constrained by the lot itself. And as I mentioned, one of the things that while they are kind of two separate projects, they are very much related in that the revenues from Hillman helps pay for the construction and the improvements at City Dock. So what we need to make sure that we do is the garage, or a Hillman Garage, is kind of not only of the right size, but also right construction cost. Because if the construction cost of Hillman goes up just to fit more cars, and you detract from how much capital you have available to pay for City Dock. So there is a balancing effect. So, and there's no benefit of kind of building a garage where you end up not needing the spaces either in 2, 5, 10, 20 years from now. So that is why it's so important to do that parking study ahead of time, because it is one of the key variables for the size of the garage, as well as the revenues that will be available to pay for both projects.
Okay, thank you.
Will, I think you had a question.
Yeah, well, I have a new question because I very much am thinking about what Bobby was thinking about. And is there any consideration, and is there any feasible possibility of expanding the footprint of the garage? It occurs to me that there was some discussion 30 years ago about changing the footprint of City Hall, and I caused a great uproar, and I'm not trying to reignite that kind of discussion, but it seems to me that given the expense and the significance of having more spaces that everybody seems to support having, is there any possible way of expanding the footprint of the garage beyond what it currently is?
I think there, and I'll let Bryce jump in here and arrest me. I think there's some, the site itself is naturally somewhat constrained. So that is what's kind of driving the desire to kind of stay within the same footprint. If we can reuse some, or at least avoid doing a lot of civil works and retaining walls and things of that nature, that savings and construction costs there then contributes to what we can do down at City Dock. So we're very conscious also on just the cost of construction for Hillman, because there is this direct relationship. So that's kind of the initial response, I guess.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, there's certainly three things we're having to balance there. One is the right size number of cars. The second being the site constraints, very tight site already there. And the third one are really our height restrictions. We're bumping right up to the height restrictions now. You know, how do people feel about, you know, in any way violating that height restriction in order to get more cars? So it's a balancing act, and we're trying to make the best recommendations we can now to kind of balance all three of those things. And also, in some cases, we might want to pull back from the footprint a little bit in order to improve views and walkability along Gorman Street, for instance, which is what we're really hoping to do.
Okay.
Tim, I don't have anything else to say that, except that I appreciate the fact and I'm encouraged by the fact that I think everybody's questions and discussion indicates that they accept that this is a good conceptual plan and that what we're all trying to do is improve it. Diane's suggestions for the boaters and Bob's suggestions for the pedestrians. And I think we all need to keep our eye on that our goal is to get this done, not to sort of hold everything back, but to think about how to make this better, a better outcome.
Yeah, I certainly concur with that. We're here to help and move this forward. It's a common good that we all, I think we're all on the same page as far as moving this forward. Kim, would you like to chime in, or Bill, other commissioners?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
It's been a very interesting discussion, but I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay. Bill?
No, I'm fine. I'm
Okay.
listening to everything, and
You're next, Roberta.
thanks for later.
Yes, Roberta.
Sorry, I was taking off mute. I just wanted to say that I've found participating in 6 meetings so far with the technical working group to be very productive. And it's also been great just to get to know all the participants. I continue to stress the importance of following the guidelines of our Historic District Design Manual, as well as the Secretary of the Interior standards, and of course our Code 2156. And based on the aggressive schedule here, I encourage a series of pre-application meetings with the commission starting soon and continuing as the project design evolves. And we've done that successfully with other big projects. So it works well when we have a project like this to have multiple pre-application meetings. Thanks.
And Roberta, we're very much committed to that path. As I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of groups that want to have, certainly want to have some input, but we're very committed to having numerous work sessions with the HPC as well as the Planning Commission.
Great.
Super. Thanks.
Yeah, that's my major point too, is that the feasibility study section that you're in now includes the design of the parking garage, and the feasibility includes feasibility of a variety of departments within City Hall. There's not only the HPC, but there's zoning and there's building permit possible issues, and those need to all come together pretty quickly in feasibility. And Bryce, you mentioned height, and fitting within the existing height constraints is the obvious best solution that won't require any action that would take a while. Zoning changes take a while, and certainly any kind of changes to height restrictions or height districts are time consuming. And I just so the sooner we get to the point where we realize that that's an issue or not, that I just encourage you to go ahead and bring that design, that feasibility forward if you can. I know I understand there's an economic side to it, but if we at least get a working model from a height point of view, especially in the first pre-app that you have, we need to surface that. I understand what you're saying. Stay within the envelope, possible the existing envelope. I think we have some understanding, and this may be new to some people, at least commissioners, that building within the existing height is probably feasible. So I think that might be, I'm going out on a limb there with the Office of Law, but I'm pretty sure that that's been tested in the past. So I wanted to let you know, at least that's my understanding. So Bryce, if you can, please get on our calendar. We are very flexible to add you to the agenda, the whole team, but particularly around the bulk and mass of the building.
Yeah, we look forward to that, and it hopefully be a matter of weeks.
Right, we meet twice a month, and we can put you on a pre-application the second month, and of course working with other city departments too. I imagine through David, you're working with other departments as well. It's not just these permitting organizations. So
yeah, so Tim, as Roberta mentioned, we have a technical committee. So Public Works, of course, is involved because they're going to sort of quasi-manage the garage, even though it's a kind of privatized project. But they'll be very much involved with City Dock, and Sally's on the
right.
working group as well. And yeah, so we have a complete technical working group. That's
great.
going on.
A lot of moving parts. It's a big project. So I wanted to focus on, again, being relatively tactical on the garage because that's first up. Does anyone have any thoughts on what some of the conceptual designs or designs we're seeing about the plazas, the parks, the structures on the City Dock area? At the risk of going on too long, those will come later, right, in the process. I doubt we will get in pre-applications. We don't need to talk so much about those, but those will come later. But I see Wendy's got her hand up. Hi, Wendy.
I appreciate it. I just thought I would ask to come and present to both commissions to share the newly released feasibility study on the stabilization and adaptive reuse of the Burtis House, and just share that the recommendations that the Park Service and in partnership with Historic Annapolis are making really more purposefully are looking to have any additions to Burtis to be reflecting of the sort of the character and nature of Waterman's history and heritage. So the images that Bryce and his team shared are concepts that are on early visioning that are a little different than the direction the Park Service is looking to head. So I would welcome to come and share the feasibility study with you all, and look forward to working with the larger City Dock team as those move forward.
Yeah, I made a note of that as well. I know those, again, they'll be coming later, but the height of that structure is quite different than in these drawings than they are in the Burtis House report. So that's an issue that needs to be fleshed out in the future. So then, of course, we would welcome to have you come, Wendy, and present, or whoever. Michael Dowling is well known to the commission, and in fact, he is our consultant to the commission. So, but I did notice, I made a note of that as one thing to look at.
Great. Thanks.
It's the sort of thing that we could do another joint meeting to save everybody time if that works out.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. And the other question I had down there is pump house. Just from a schedule point of view, in your schedule, you mentioned the drain redesign on Main Street, I think mainly. I assume that includes the additional pump house design, which will be a separate project as well. So if you want some input on your Gantt chart, I would add the additional pump station to that, because I bet it's the same time as the storm realignment. I assume so, but
yeah, there's some work to be done there, and we're working on that as well now.
Yeah, they could be done concurrent. Well, as a part of the same, and that's a city project, I assume.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments on this right now? I just again, I really we're all going in the right direction. This is extremely exciting. And yes, Allie.
Just a quick question, and just for the option of the garage going underground has been nixed because of the cost issue right from the get-go. Just missed that step.
No, I don't. We haven't made any final determination yet on that option. There is, as you mentioned, there is a substantial cost associated with going down. So I think that's a key component of that kind of trade-off between cost of Hillman and funds available for City Dock.
Okay. Thank you.
Roberta, did you have a comment? Okay.
No, thank you.
Okay. Well, again, yes, David.
If I could just, and I was remiss before, but if I could just thank our partners for joining the call. So Wendy and Jonathan, thank you. I think Robert's already signed off, but we really appreciate your coming on and contributing to this discussion.
Absolutely. It's a late night, all these late nights, right? Get ready for long meetings, right? And I think we also want to think out a little bit outside of, it's important that we have public hearings and that we follow our rules, but I think working sessions are also possible I think we can be flexible in this, on a project like this, to work together. I think that's of use. All right, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate all the hard work, and we're in this together, and we want to get to the best possible solution on schedule. So thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you,
night, everybody.
everyone.
Okay. I'm sure that Anthony, you got a lot out of that, and Brian and Dan. Thanks for hanging on. So the next item on our agenda is a pre-application from a group who's planning to do a project on Maryland Avenue, and this is a pre-application, and I need to get your acknowledgement as future applicants that these pre-applications are done as a courtesy to the applicant, and in no way should our discussion be taken as pre-approval or rejection of concept. So I just need to get you to say, yes, I understand. A thumbs up there from Anthony or one of you that's on screen.
Yes, I understand.
Okay, great. All right, thanks. Tell us about your project, and then we'll have a conversation.
Well, let me start real quick. Anthony actually was on the City Dock committee, if I remember right, and I attended a bunch of those meetings, so I'm sure it was exciting for him to see it finally happening all these years later. So this idea of Umbrella Sky started in Portugal, and we had thought about trying to do it on West Street at one time, and we didn't get that far. And so when the mayor got elected, we wanted to do the project, but we wanted to try to spread it around. So Maryland Avenue seemed like the perfect place to try to do this. And so I brought this idea to the business owners on Maryland Avenue who I really liked the idea, and hoping it will not only beautify our city, but bring business to our city. So I just wanted to say those words and then introduce Dan and Anthony to give the proposal.
Mark, do I share my screen now at this point?
Yes, sir. And if you have any trouble, I'm ready to share as well. So go ahead and share your screen.
Hitting share on the bottom, but that's it. Did you do that or did I?
No, I don't see anything. You want me to go ahead and share?
Okay. Yeah, it might save time.
All right.
Before I just start, or while this is coming up, I'm sorry that the other presenters for the previous City Dock plan or the action committee have left, but I really wanted to commend them on that. Having spent that time on the City Dock Advisory Committee, which is what it was called. If Bob was still there, I would remind him, we had many discussions over those years.
Yeah.
I was very impressed. I'm very happy to see that come together like that. And the only one I really wanted to get rid of was the Harbor Master building, but certainly understand why they made their adjustments for the pumps and utilities there. But I know I'll pass them on to that other committee. That was excellent. Really excited to see that.
Good.
And like that, and like my involvement with the City Dock Advisory Committee at that time, I've always been, an advocate for space in City Dock and in Annapolis, and proponent of even Fred Kent and Project Public Spaces and creating those spaces in Annapolis that creates energy and things for people to enjoy being in such a beautiful historic city. And that's really what attracted me to this umbrella project for our little street there in Maryland Avenue that's set up from the main City Dock. So City Dock needs what they're projecting there, and what was laid out there just a while ago. It was fabulous, and that's what it's always needed. And I really, the distinction between the two committees, one advisory, this one now really seems to be the action. And again, delighted to see that. And again, what it led on to this. So Brian and Mayor Buckley introduced this to our committee back in 2019, I think it might have been, Brian, or at least, yeah, it must have been 2019. And
it was very close. Actually, we were very close to getting it to happen that year, but we just were a little too late. And so thought we'll do it in 2020, and then COVID hit. So now we're shooting for this year.
So I grabbed onto it even in 2019. I traveled to Paris and visited a number of them there, one big one that was there. And even went back to Ireland when I was bringing my kids around Europe and visited one there and tried to talk to people that set them up and just looked at how stunning it was and how much people were enjoying it. And it was perfect. So I was right on it to start off in 2020, right at this real time here where we're not at that process to get us up for 2020. Then COVID hit and everything went to the wall. So even during the latter parts of 2020 now, we resurrected this. And I've been talking to a number of people. I know I have plenty of support for it in the community from different businesses already talked about prior to this. And then met Dan Douglas, who has been terrific help for me from the technical aspects of trying to present this in the city, what we need to do to get to the point of being able to actually launch it and put it up. So what we put together here and what I'll talk through is really just a number of slides giving you pictures, because I think pictures hold 1,000 words so you can see it. And this first image here is a transposed one right on Maryland Avenue. You can tell of the umbrellas where it would go, where it would lay. But I've also got, if you go on to the next slide here, I've just, there's over 32 sites around the world, and they're all started by this company in Portugal called Sexta Fiera, which is a design company. And they've been proven in all these places. And you can continue to the next slide here, because I'm just going to give you a couple of examples around the world to just energize it and attract people to just really nice spaces, colorful sunlight coming through, providing a bit of shade, and just an explosion of colors to add to the attractions of whatever historic site it is. You can move on to the next one as I'm talking there. for Maryland Avenue, it would be perfect. It's just a great street. It's got this scape with the State House. It's a place where many people take a lot of photographs, and it adds to it all the way down to Gate 3 at the Naval Academy. Many married couples, I see wedding couples getting pictures there all the time. And so it would just heighten that whole experience and really put Maryland Avenue on the map. It's been shown to attract people, not just the locals that live within Annapolis, but also from all over the world when they visit a spot, when they find that there's one there, to that town to enjoy, not just maybe attracted by the umbrellas, but then they'd be able to enjoy the city dock and everything else that the city of Annapolis offers. It's the 1 in 10 that I've referred to. I think I quoted Fred Kent in that, and this would be one of them. The many supporters of projects, and then with Dan Douglas, so we have some technical things that we have to get through. We also have to be able to support it, and that's what we're trying to present to you here. So this is what the image would be. You can move on to the next slide, please. This one's here in Florida in Coral Gables. Next one again, please. This one is in Paris. Next one. Another vision of one, and this is in Portugal. Next one, please. Again, the company is Sexta Fiera. They've done this all over the world, and that's why I've wanted, even from the start, I'm really the kind of anchor of Maryland Avenue. I'm the one that's going to drive this project forward. I communicate with our association. They're very familiar with it now and have allowed me to just take it on board. Go Away will be a support of it financially as well as the time, coordinating all the efforts. But we want to use the professionals. We want it done properly. We want it done professionally. We want it done with the least impact to any of the surrounding buildings and the least impact to any other codes or regulations that we have, and so that they're all in compliance. We've obviously met with the fire chief on a number of occasions to continue to discuss this project. So from here, I'm going to hand over to Dan Douglas, who again, I appreciate has offered his time and services technically on the architecture side, as well as his communication with the city departments to be able to translate what we're trying to do into a permitted and approved concept. So I'll hand over to Dan at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Could we go to the next slide, please? Normally, the vendor of these art installations handles every detail of the installation. The installation is shipped from Europe along with the crew, and they handle everything. We wanted to take over one particular aspect of the installation, that being the lateral wires that span across Maryland Avenue. We have two reasons for wanting to do that ourselves. The first being we want control over any intervention at the facades of our historic buildings. We don't want to entrust that to someone else. And the second reason being fire safety. We've talked to the fire marshal, I think 3 times about this so far, and he's made it clear that he wants a method of being able to quick release these wires. A firefighter with a pike pole needs to be able to drop this installation into the street so we can drag it out of the way in the event of a fire. So those are the two issues that I was asked to address. And if we could see the next slide, please. So the wires, there are going to be 7 wires spanning across, and then there are, I believe, at least 11 wires that run the length of Maryland Avenue. And the challenge is to find suitable spots to anchor the 7 cross wires. Can we go to the next slide, please? This is simply, these are all from the vendor, and that's just a diagram of the process of installing these. Could we go to the next one, please? And they provide all of the parameters for the distance between the longitudinal wires. The height of these wires is also controlled in this case by fire safety needs. So the fire department needs 14 feet of clearance underneath these umbrellas. The umbrellas are 3 feet tall, so the wires will be 17 feet, at least 17 feet off of the street level. Could we go to the next, please? There's a diagram of that. And obviously it's in centimeters. Next slide, please. In this slide, you can see the solution to the need to quickly remove this installation in the event of a fire. The solution that the vendor provides is to simply cut the wires. And we talked to the fire marshal a couple of times about this. And it's not that the fire department can't, but that's going to take some time to get a ladder off the truck and get it positioned and beam the ladder up between wires. And it would take a fair amount of time to cut 7 wires, or at least enough wires to drop this to the street and drag it out of the way. Next slide, please. This is what they consider a quick release system. This is what's provided by the vendor if you allow them to install every detail of this. And it's simply a carabiner clip. But again, that requires getting a ladder and getting access to this 17 feet up in the air. And the fire marshal is not comfortable with that. Next slide, please. The 7 cross wires, the arrows in this diagram indicate that these are the anchor points. And you see that every anchor point in the diagram is on the side of a building. So we're planning to anchor not to the front face of a building, but to the side of the building for 2 reasons. The strength of the anchor point will be better if the fasteners are perpendicular to the direction of pull. It's just a whole lot harder to pull something out that way, perpendicular, than it is if the fasteners were parallel to the wires. So the challenge has been to find locations on the sides of the buildings that are where we can anchor with access and at the right height. Next slide, please. This shows those locations in a 3D view taken off of Google Earth. Next slide is going to be the opposite side of the street. We're going to, as soon as we can, do a test run of these. We're going to do one and get the fire marshal out with a pike pole and see how easy it's going to be to actually quick release these and drop them into the street. Next slide, please. This is a simple diagram of the concept that I'd like to try in our test. The bar has at least 2, and we're probably going to expand that to multiple potential anchor points. We'll be looking primarily to anchor into the corner post of the building on the side. If we can't anchor into a corner post, then we'll look for the first available stud. But in any event, these are not going to be anchored into just siding. They're going to be anchored into structure. And then you've got a simple pulley wheel that the wire crosses over. The spring will be a pretty heavy duty spring that will provide just enough movement that the pike pole can grab the ring that you see at the bottom and give it a sharp tug and pull it over the bolt and release the system down into the street. Next slide, please. I'll let Anthony take over from this point.
So we've been talking about this project for some time now in the community, and Joanne Vaughan at the American Federation of Art has just offered a letter of support for the art of the event itself. So it would create an art exhibit basically, and we've had their support, and they're hoping to raise some money for it as well. You want me to conclude, Dan, or do you have any more?
Go ahead.
So this is the project, and the next slide will just bring us back to the beginning slide of Maryland Avenue with that image in it. We believe in, I've had so many great comments, everybody I've talked to about it from the public, and everybody on the street, and anybody I've tried to show it to. As a piece of art, it's very minimally invasive with regard to the buildings itself, and we'll maintain that objective. And it's a temporary structure. So we hope to install it for you know, potentially depending on how everything aligns this year, but would be during the summer months. I'm looking really for 90 days to start it with as an attraction, and then it would be removed. And with that, I'll conclude with the Annapolis project and open up the questions.
Actually, I just want to know if Dan has patented that quick release system. If he hasn't, I will. It looks great. Okay, Roberta, would you like to? What we usually do in the conversation is we let Roberta comment, and then we'll take comments from the other commissioners and provide you with some guidance, hopefully.
I will just say briefly that I talked to Brian first and then Anthony about this quite a while back, and I found it very interesting. It was kind of at the bottom of the pile of projects that I was dealing with at the moment, and I appreciate their patience. Another challenge was, do you find an architect? Do you find an engineer? So, you know, I'm so glad they have found someone who really provides both all in one package. I will then turn it over to John Tower, who actually has been out on site with them, in case you want to say anything, John.
Sure. Well, I met with Dan and the owner of Galway Bay, and I think that Dan's approach is very thoughtful. This would create a temporary obstruction of a view of the State House, but I think in over 230 years or so, maybe losing 9 months of the view and replacing it with something else that's new and interesting is worthwhile. Everything that Dan is proposing is reversible. It's minimally invasive. It's a very good approach. I felt positive about it.
You said 9 months. I'll just correct you. We were asking for 90 days at first. 3 months.
What I meant was 9 days. Oh, sorry.
90 days is what we're talking about.
90 days.
Okay, super. Okay, other commissioners. Who wants to go? Who wants to go first? Bill.
Tim.
Oh, Kim. Kim, yes.
No, Bill can go.
No, Kim, it's ladies first.
Well, not always, but anyway, I just wanted to say, I have a sister who lives in Spain, so am familiar with this sort of installation, and it has fascinated me. So I'm very interested to see the possibility of it coming to Annapolis. I just would like to mention it would be neat to individualize it and give it a bit of a twist, if possible, in that I recently bought a gay pride flag from Route 1 Apparel that was the Maryland flag, which is very distinctive and highly graphic, in colors. And I'm wondering if somehow we could tie together the fact that this is the capital of Maryland with a colorful display using some of the graphics of the Maryland flag, which are really pretty unique. You know, people who see the Maryland flag can't believe that it's been our flag for so many years. But if you see it displayed in various colors,
of course,
it's even more interesting. And so
try the umbrellas first, and then at some point, maybe do like dinghy sails or something else to make it.
Whoops, you're breaking up. Or is it just me?
Okay, well, I'm just wondering if, because it's the capital city, possibly we can introduce something that's uniquely Maryland about it.
I think there are, and I had so many pictures that I was filling into the first slide presentation that Dan had to send it back to me and say, we can't stay on there for an hour. But there's a lot of options, and there's a lot of things that we can produce. I guess the challenge for us now is like, can we get it done and achieved, and to even
fabricated
colors. But after that, the ideas are numerous, even to a holiday application, if it was possible to winterscapes. But there, to answer your question, Ms. Finch, there are plenty, and putting a Maryland theme on it, it would just be the fabrication of the umbrellas to that design.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll tell you, it looks great in Spanish towns. I know, but I do think that we could make it uniquely Annapolis and have it a lovely, unique display.
I think my computer froze there for a minute, so I apologize. But one idea was to use dinghy sails. So maybe next year we could do dinghy sails and then put them in the use the same colors as the Maryland flag.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Will, go ahead.
A couple things.
Bill.
I have a little concern about damage to the buildings, especially where you have the cables that actually go around the corner of the building diagonally across the road. And even where they're parallel to the wall of the building, where that cable is going to be rubbing for that 90 days. How you plan to protect that?
Dan, do you want to take that one, or?
Yeah, we had the contractor who would install this our part of the system. We had that person at the last meeting, and we talked about that exact point. And he was very confident that he could mount a system. It would be fastened at the side of the building, but it would wrap around the corner at that point to provide protection from the corner. And we didn't press him any further for details, but he was completely confident that he could protect the corners of the building.
Yeah, I guess I'd kind of want to know what that might look like.
Yeah.
Me too. We'll find out.
One other item, if I could make a suggestion, the way you have the ring for your release and the catch it appears it may interfere with any pole hook. May I suggest you use a figure 8, so the upper ring is on your hook and the lower ring is for the grab?
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll change the patent.
Yeah, but I get half now.
Okay. Will, you had a comment. You're on mute still, bud.
I want to ask a question of Roberta and John before I say more. So are you both, your comments imply that you think this is a feasible project? Am I understanding that correctly?
I consider it temporary, reversible, and visually interesting. You give up a little in terms of an incredible view of the State House from that block of Maryland Avenue. But then on the other hand, this will really have a, what is that, Will?
That's my dog. I love squeak toys.
So, but what you will get is a much cooler Maryland Avenue in the hottest months of the year. And that street really heats up.
Yeah.
So it'd be quite pleasant.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear you say that. I just wanted to be sure I was understanding you correctly before I said anything more, because if you don't think it's feasible, then we may not want to take the time to pursue it much further. But anyway, Roberta, do you agree?
Correct. I was a little worried at the very beginning of the discussion of this, of the effect on the buildings. And I think this is the least invasive way of attaching it. And as John says, reversible, and it is to the sides and not to the front. So I was thinking that, we were going to have all these new holes eventually on the front of the building, which we already have too many attachments now on Maryland Avenue. But going in on the side like this will be far less noticeable.
Yeah, well,
So
I'm
I'm good.
glad to hear that from both of you, because I also think it's a very interesting and appealing project. And the only thing I would add to the discussion is that when you look up from down towards the Hammond Harwood House, towards the State House, it's really the dome that is the striking part of the State House that's visible. And I know this would even impede that, but that's with the wires. It's not the most appealing view of the State House that one can find. And I think this, given a temporary existence, would be a very nice addition. Cooling, as John said. I just wouldn't want it to be too colorful unless it was the kind of thing that Kim was suggesting, that it had some local meaning in the choice of colors. Like the first slide that Mr. Clark showed, I mean, that's very colorful, but almost to me, too colorful. It's colorful for the sake of being colorful, if you follow my drift. That's my only comment.
Okay.
So can I just comment, is Will, you were talking about color. I was in Puerto Rico 2 years ago, and this is, I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
La
more subtle.
Placita. Yeah, it's all white umbrellas, and there are lights that were above the umbrellas, and it created this magical atmosphere. It was so cool. It was vibrant. It was just the prettiest. I mean, I don't know if you, that doesn't do it justice. And I didn't plan to testify.
I may be splitting hairs here. That to me is very beautiful. But
it was beautiful.
Intense sort of primary colors and secondary colors in the first slide, that was just a little too much, I think, for our historic district. That's easily addressed, right, Mr. Clark?
Yeah, and again, you know, that one in Puerto Rico, a lot of these ones that are done around the world, sometimes they're done for holiday season, so they're more lit up at night to give a different kind of impression. I think what we're looking at here is a summer attraction, so it would be want to be bright and colorful, but I get your point with regard to that second slide.
Yeah.
To answer an earlier question, just with regard to the attachments, we're also looking at, as you mentioned, there are a number of attachments to some of the buildings on Maryland Avenue. We own the building at Galway Bay 6163, so we own that building, and there is actually one hook that might be potentially be able to use that's already existing. So both Jan and I are examining every single building, you know, from this sketch, because we spent a lot of time to just work out the best possible crossing for the street to achieve what we're trying to achieve, which is both tension for the umbrellas to be secure and not to cause anything with regard to any wind that comes through, and also for the safety of the building and the most minimally invasive attachment that we can make. So whatever ones we can use that are already existing and that are very secure, we will use.
Okay. Bill?
Yeah, the umbrellas, I take it they're translucent so that any color is on the daylight or night or whatever is going to be transferred to the ground, so you're going to have a patterning in that case. Is that true?
I've seen it both ways.
Yeah.
I personally, I like the translucent idea. And as far as the color goes, well, I kind of like the happy feel. For some reason, the all white always makes me think of a funeral.
Oh, I'm not saying they have to be all white. I just, that almost like a box of Crayola crayons, to me, would not be very.
Some of that was because of the digital, just the implying it. Jeff, it doesn't look quite right. Yeah, we didn't pick those colors. That was just an example.
But I like my Crayolas.
All right.
Bill, in the literature provided by the vendor, there are a couple of photographs that do show that, yes, they're translucent, and yes, these splashes of color are on the pavement. My only caveat I would offer there is that's pretty easy to do with Photoshop, so I can't guarantee that's actually how it's done.
Now, I'm going to go back and talk about the height, if you don't mind. The fire marshal wants to be able to clip them. Are they going to be easily able to reach the 17 or so feet to those hooks? That's a long bar.
The wires are at 17 feet. Then they're going to come across the street, wrap around the pulley wheel, and drop down 4 feet, 5 feet, whatever. We want the now figure 8 hook. Thank you for that suggestion. At about 12 to 13 feet, high enough to keep it out of the way of mischief, but not so high that an average height firefighter with a 6-foot pike pole cannot reach it easily.
Okay, so then we will have the pulley, and then it will drop down the side of the building further to 4 feet, 5 feet. And should hopefully will work.
I hope so.
All right.
We hope to do a test model within the next 4 weeks to have it up structured so that one, using right in front of Galway Bay, that one first and test it and meet with the fire department and test it.
Great. Okay. Bobby, have you commented yet?
I have not. I've kind of learned a lot in the presentation. At the beginning, I was not quite sure what I was looking at. So I appreciate the great presentation. The thing I keep thinking about is if this gets more people onto Maryland Avenue and shopping and eating and walking around on Maryland Avenue, that's a great thing. So that's the thing that's foremost in my mind. I think the concerns that I have between damage to the buildings and safety of, the structure itself, those have all been addressed. So I think I'm good at this point.
Okay.
Just to give you a little information, when they did this, I think it was Coral Gables, they had measured the foot traffic on the street was about 2,600 people a day before at a normal time. And then when that was up, it jumped up to over 12,000 a day.
Oh boy.
The city garage is filled up with people wanting to come see the Umbrella Sky project there.
Nice.
So we need to do this before the Hillman Garage goes up.
Yeah. Okay. I concur really with what everyone has been saying. I think that just to a certain extent summarize and draw our attention again to the guidelines that we are trying to apply here. We've all talked about A1, the town plan and focal points, which is the view of the State House. In fact, the State House is specifically mentioned as a focal point, but it is temporary in nature, 90 days. And I think from the Hammond Harwood House, you'll still be able to see above the umbrella sky. You'll still be able to see. So it's really in that one block you're getting, it's not obscuring it for the whole street.
Tim, in the rendering that they provided, the extent of that rendering is further towards Prince George Street than what it'll be.
Yeah,
I think standing further back on Maryland Avenue, you'll see the umbrellas and you'll see the dome at the State House above the umbrellas.
I concur. So and the other aspects that we all mentioned, D3 is preservation of original features. D13 has to do with historic masonry. Those are the guidelines that we're asked to apply to make sure that a project doesn't destroy historic fabric. And finally, this Secretary of the Interior's guideline number 10 is the one that talks about reversibility. This is going to be completely reversible without any damage to the historic structures. I do concur that when you do make your final presentation, more detail on how will there be a piece of rubber hose that protects the corner of the building? More detail on that. I think where it wraps and goes at an angle. Mm-hmm. I think that would be really useful to make sure we are comfortable with that. Okay. So I think we are in unanimous opinion that this is a feasible project. And given those reasons that I just stated. So Tammy, did you catch what I just said as partial for the summary?
I did.
Okay, perfect. So then all we need to do is say that the commission considers this a feasible project for the following reasons, the things that I just cited, and the one additional comment on detail of protective corners. And with that, I think we are complete with this and we look forward to it. I have, on a personal note, I saw this in Béziers, France about 3 years ago, and it's delightful.
It's an experience.
Especially on older streets. It made so much sense. It was okay.
Well, I'd like to thank Dan and Anthony for all of their work on this, and I'd like to thank each of you commissioners.
Okay.
You need a new computer.
You need a new phone, I
He
think.
does.
Your Wi-Fi's down more.
All right.
Tim, can I just say that this, what could be a better way to
Yes.
celebrate a post-pandemic world? You
That's a
know,
good
something
point.
like this. Yeah.
Agreed. And the economic nature of what we talked about too. It is in our goals to strengthen the local economy and improve property values. And I think this will goes
Thank
to
you,
that.
Alderman Tierney, for mentioning that. I did remember, I forgot to actually say that, but I'm glad that you brought it up because it is that time for a bit of bright color.
Right.
That time
Yeah.
to celebrate our streets and hopefully out of this too.
Right. What better way? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Look forward to it.
Thank
Let us
you
know if
much.
you want any comments
right.
on colors. We're not allowed to
Signing
comment on
off.
color normally.
Good night.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. All right. One more short thing on the agenda. This is umbrella night. Sally Nash approached Roberta and I early in the year about looking forward to Main Street in particular post winter, and as we start dealing with structures out on the street and dining out on Main Street mainly, but all the way down around Market House and all the way down to City Dock. And we want to continue to support the merchants in every way we can. But we also want to reduce or help manage visual clutter. So one of the ways we can do that is through using our guidelines for outdoor furniture. And one of the things that is written into our guidelines right now is, I'll read it to you. Shall be no overhead structural enclosure shading device such as awnings other than existing or approved for storefront use, or umbrellas. So for when we drafted these, first of all, times were a bit different and there wasn't as much activity on the street. And the concept of a view down Main Street with umbrellas over tables was, I can't remember exactly how, but I was involved to a certain extent, but it was felt that would block views. Sally wisely, I think, said, can we discuss the idea of loosening that or changing it so that we don't expressly forbid umbrellas? So I agreed to talk to you all about it and get your feedback. I drafted just some wording that I'll send out to you later after tonight's discussion. But basically, we talked about if we allowed them, what would we want to say about them? Would we want to restrict advertising? Would we want to determine materials like we do for awnings? So I just wanted to have a brief discussion. It's the end of the meeting. It's 9:10, but I wanted to let you know this is in process. We have the ability to make changes to our guidelines by a simple discussion. We don't even necessarily need to vote. We just we agree on it. So what thoughts do you have? Yeah, Bill, first up.
Zero advertisement, or we'll end up with Bud Beer around the ring, all look like a circus.
But you're okay with the idea of umbrellas?
I'm okay with umbrellas. Conservative. Let's go on the conservative side here.
I'm of a similar mind, but I would put even more helpful language in there about size and color and, type and things so that we can get some sort of control. Because if we don't give people some guidelines on umbrellas, it's going to be crazy. I mean, there's stuff we won't even have thought of that they will come up with. So it's, we unfortunately have to think about the few who will, get a little
Shall we
too
say
creative.
earth tones?
We were able over the winter to prescribe white for the tents, and we got cooperation on that. The office, the planning and zoning office, put out guidelines, temporary guidelines. So I think that's possible. Roberta, do you have any additional thoughts? I think you and I talked about this already. So.
No, I had just said that, I'm looking at my notes, that it was important to say that these are detached and not attached in any way to the building. And that they're fabric,
Yes.
just like we say awnings are fabric.
Yeah, we need to look to the awning guidelines. It talks about flame retardant things that, and there's some additional wording there. So
It's an umbrella, not a gazebo, not a tent, not, you know.
what's an umbrella, right?
Right.
And this is specifically in the sidewalk guidelines.
Oh, well, I'm looking at the cafe furniture guidelines.
That's
Where is
exactly
this?
where they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
On page 71 under structural enclosures.
Yeah. And I think I want to try to focus this just on this one, on the umbrellas, because some of the other sections talked about no barriers or planters and things like that, and we're not really enforcing that right now. Clearly, in the emergency, we're not, and in the future, we may not. So let me, if we're in general support, I'll draft some language for our next meeting and send it out in an email. I think I'm a little concerned about enforcement. When we do something like this, you got to back it up, and the people who enforce it are strapped to a certain extent. So the more restrictive, you'll do it. Okay. We've had, I think we'll talk a little bit more with Sally and Roberta about how this can be enforced if we have a bad actor, one or two. Advertising is clearly something we've had some success with on the tents. In fact, that actually worked pretty well. The advertising had to be inside the tent.
Jim, they're small enough, we could just send John to remove them.
There you go. Or hire a bunch of hooligans to remove them at night if they're not complying.
The important thing for this meeting is just knowing if everyone agrees, because the language is so strong that, you know, I had no recourse for anyone who just wanted even a small umbrella over a table, because the wording says there shall not be.
Yeah.
So important to know if the commission is in consensus that we could allow umbrellas under certain conditions to be defined.
Right.
Yeah, if I can get a nod, we are in consensus, I think, on that.
Yeah, I do have one question though. I mean, right now we have a whole lot of sidewalk dining. We don't know what's going to happen when the emergency order and our current situation resolves. I mean, these bump outs, these lovely little orange and white fencing. I mean, you know, if we go back to normal, there's not going to be that many places people can have tables with umbrellas. And so that will kind of self-govern the amount of umbrellas that are out there.
I think you're right.
If we start having more of the mayor's little projects, as I call them, to, you know, kind of put things out on the edge of the street and have the little, I forget what they were called, parklets or whatever, then we could have a whole bunch of these umbrellas.
Yeah.
I could tell you there will be folks asking for parklets.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But you're right that with once this pandemic is over, the spaces will be greatly reduced.
Yeah. And it'll mostly be farther down on Main Street where the view shed is not as cluttered. There's not, it's the upper edge of Main Street.
Yeah.
That is the major problem from a clutter point of view. We also, Roberta mentioned that we need Public Works to be able to evaluate this on any application, because they are in charge of the free movement in the sidewalks. So we'll see how it goes. All right. Well,
if they decide they want to have more of these parklets, as Roberta says, you know, if the mayor decides that this is a project he really wants to put forward, then we have to figure out how to take our guidelines and fit them within those new projects that he has, especially if they decide to become permanent.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. I'll draft something for our next meeting, and I'll send it out in advance so we can review it and we can be ready to comment on it. That's really it for tonight. I just wanted, this is an example of where in our guidelines we would like to start working, and Bobby and I have talked a little bit about starting a working group back to where we were, and so I think I'll bring that up in our next administrative meeting, just to start tackling some of these ambiguous wording or conflicting wording.
Or new technology.
Or new technology, yeah.
Windows.
Yep. All right. I think that's it. I will take Tammy, did I forget anything yet?
Nope, you're
Okay.
good.
All right, well, thank you. All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right, thanks, everyone.